Hi everyone, my name is Vasanth. Welcome to Open Source Live, where we're talking to the leading experts in open source and AI and getting their perspective on how the market is growing. I'm very excited to be joined by Aurimas and to get his thoughts on everything that's happening here at the Race Summit and how developers should be excited about open source. So thanks so much for coming and joining us.
Thank you for having me here.
So to kick things off, would just love to start with a really broad question, which is, generally, what are your thoughts on the open source ecosystem? How is it doing? And what are the key insights that the developers should be paying attention to as it comes to open source and how it's growing?
I love open source, and I'm also a builder.
Yeah.
I've been in the data space for the last 13 years, and for the last 3 years, I'm in GenAI space. So I'm building agents and agentic systems. And I think open source is critical in these kinds of applications. And I really love how open source is catching up to these proprietary models, little by little, right? But the trend is clear that eventually we will kind of converge to the same, at least quality level when it comes to open source versus proprietary. And we will have some proprietary models, top proprietary models locked behind the paywall, but those open source will be good enough to build those applications that we are building. Now, what I'm excited a lot about when it comes to open source is naturally the models expanding in the modalities that we serve, so text, video, images, and maybe the part that I'm most excited about is the robotics models. So models specifically tailored for robotics applications. And we already see some work being done there by NVIDIA, but I would love to see a lot more in open source there because that's not yet.
What do you think about the term physical AI? Because I know NVIDIA and Jensen talk about that as a term. How do you see kind of open source moving to that next wave of robotics and physical AI?
For physical AI, by physical AI, I would guess you mean generative AI fully operating machines, right? So what I think about it is that probably it is one of the biggest parts of our future, right? Because robotics obviously is important in replacing manual labor, which is not really like that shouldn't really be performed by humans, right? Because it will allow humans to take on new roles, more impactful roles. It will allow them to actually reskill and provide more value to the society. And we don't want that hard labor to be done by humans anyway. So, and for that, we need specific set of generative models, right? Specifically tailored for generating those actions that those machines need. So, and Jensen kind of talks about this evolution from I think it's predictive AI, then agentic AI, and then eventually physical AI. So he's specifically talking about this. So definitely, I think this is the maybe not yet the next leap, but a few leaps afterwards, we will definitely be there. Right? So that's what I think.
A lot more work to be done to get to that point. But maybe taking it one step back, I think you mentioned agentic AI a few times. So what are you seeing kind of happen in this space, and how are you seeing developers kind of experiment and build with agents in all the applications that they're building?
So this is also very tightly connected to the open source, I believe, because as we kind of build out these agentic systems, we notice that smaller models tend to do good enough for specific tasks, right? So we need a very strong base of open source, smaller foundation models that can be fine-tuned to perform specific tasks, so specific nodes in the agentic system. And I think open source will be playing a huge role in this, specifically for small language models, right? And the trend that I see is exactly that. So we build those very focused agents that can perform specific tasks very well, and then we connect them into a more sophisticated graph, right? But when it comes to agentic AI specifically, there's, I think, some confusion in the industry and the market of what it really means. And I think what everyone is saying agentic AI really is really distributed network of agents, which could be distributed over networks. So it's kind of almost internet of agents rather
Sure.
than regular agentic systems. And we still have so many problems to be solved there.
Yeah.
It's not easy to kind of manage state of this kind of system. And there are open source initiatives targeting this, like Agency, for example,
Yep.
which is specifically trying to govern all of the frameworks that are popping up, like MCP and A2A,
Yep.
and adding yet another layer on top to kind of try and govern on how even these frameworks, new frameworks, need to be used to properly do tracing, identity management of agents, and similar things. So not solved by anywhere yet, right?
No, but I think the standards are super important, and I was going to ask you about them if you hadn't brought it up already, because I think it's a absolutely key thing that's happening in the ecosystem. Obviously, I don't think we fully finalized on the definitive standard, but I think A2A and MCP are 100% like the top ones right now. What just in terms of open source frameworks, how are you seeing developers approach that as they're starting to build, not only with open source models, but equally the frameworks that are existing like Kuru AI or LangGraph that are out there today?
So I'm a big fan of both LangGraph and Kuru AI. I'm not that big of a fan of LangSmith because I think it's already served its own purpose. And now we are moving to frameworks that allow you to tinker lower level with your systems. However, I see that once the applications become more and more complex in implementation, developers tend to fall back to the old ways of building those applications. So we even tend to drop a framework in order of being able to go even lower level. So tinker with the details, right? So I'm a user of LangGraph. I'm a user of Kuru AI. I'm also a teacher of both. But I also understand that they have limits. Right? So I believe that framework wars are still there, are still happening, and the frameworks that we have today might not necessarily be the winners, let's say, in 4 years. So I'm really keen to seeing how it evolves. But we observed similar things with JavaScript, for example, right? It was not the first.
It's always like there's always new innovations, frameworks trying to simplify or solve for specific use cases, right? And so,
but they are super useful to start off, kick off, and
and we're very early, I think, in this whole agentic wave right now. Speaking of agents, from an infrastructure perspective, how do you see agents changing the game in terms of what developers need as kind of the underlying hardware, if you will, to build out their applications and ecosystem?
So when it comes to the underlying hardware, so when it comes specifically to serving models and models that we are using, so the big shift is that we are producing a lot more tokens, right? That's clear, because you need to store all of the, not all of them, but parts of the interaction history that you then nitpick and feed into specific agent nodes. But in general, this is just means a lot more tokens, right? And this is also where this context engineering wave that's just now popping up is trying to address all of the data that you need to input into your context so that the agents would work really well. And this is where we need small and fast models, because in order to perform a specific chain of tasks in a meaningful amount of time, we also need the tokens to be produced very quickly, right? So we need smaller quantized models, we need faster models, and we need a lot more compute. And compute is a big bottleneck. Right? That's what I see on the hardware kind of level.
And when you mention the smaller models, especially in the agentic context, what I notice is that generally they don't perform well unless you do the fine-tuning, right? How are you seeing adoption, fine-tuning? What are some of the learnings that you've had kind of in experimenting with agents and doing fine-tuning?
When it comes to fine-tuning specifically, maybe I don't have any like great insights that would help you. You just need to fine-tune the models. Like how you get the data to fine-tune those models is very important, because you can actually start running your application on bigger models, right? And then you implement a proper eval cycle and error analysis to figure out where your applications are failing, right? And then you look at that specific pinpoint, those specific failure modes, and then you use that data to tune the models. And this is maybe it's already in standard in the industry, right? That's how you do it. So I think the biggest part is in actually collecting the data that you need to fine-tune the models, and you do that by implementing observability and evals in a proper manner, and all of those flywheels that help you improve your.
And are you seeing anything on the eval side, just in terms of open source frameworks or best practices there?
So open source frameworks, I'm always trying to kind of use the tested ones, right? So I'm also a big fan of LangSmith, for example, even though I know that there are there's Opic, right, upcoming big platform. There is Langfuse, which is very popular. There is Aurimas Phoenix, there's Braintrust, etc., etc., right? But so the platforms, all of them are kind of good fit for the use case of your evaluation purposes, right? So you just pick one, any of them. The evals are the hard part, right?
Yeah.
They're trying to figure out how to properly define them. And for me, I have only succeeded in doing that by actually looking into your data and defining custom evals for your specific tasks.
Yeah.
So you have those groups of general evals available in the frameworks out there, so you can start using them initially, but they will most likely not be good enough as you scale out and you build out your specific capabilities. So you need to look into the system that you're building and create your own dedicated eval set.
Yeah.
There's no workaround.
There's no easy button that we can nibble.
And this also signals a great opportunity still available in evals. So there's a lot of space for startups to kind of conquer this space still.
Yeah. How do you see, like kind of in the macro, I know developers kind of get desensitized from this, but we are equally seeing, as you rightly said, that AI inference demand is really growing. And at the same time, on the data center side, you're seeing that they're really strapped for energy, and they're struggling to find enough resources to actually scale it out. How do you see open source potentially even helping there in the sense of allowing more opportunity, more minds to kind of come together to improve the efficiency requirements in the data center and allow us to figure out how we get past this challenge?
So open source can help maybe in few angles. So one is that you actually have the model weights and you can tinker with them. So you can quantize your models and make them smaller and faster. How open source in general could solve the energy crisis that we are about to face and we are already facing, I'm not sure, right? Maybe
or maybe more broadly, even beyond open source. How do you think about how we solve that challenge?
For now, we don't have much options. We need to utilize all kinds of energy, so we can't rely only on green. We need to utilize nuclear, and unfortunately, we have a lot of those initiatives, nuclear initiatives, stopped in Europe. So France is doing a great, I would say, service to Europe by focusing on nuclear, right? So definitely that, and eventually we might be able to have all of the energy maybe in green, but that's far into the future. It will not work.
Yeah, I mean, from the Multimodal perspective, we're really trying to push that, because we have this crisis ongoing right now. You need a more efficient solution across the whole stack, right? Not only at the open source side, whether you're using smaller models, which then kind of reduce your footprint, but equally at the hardware side, using a more efficient architecture to produce more tokens for every watt of energy, right? If you can maximize across the whole stack, then at least in that sense, we're going to improve things, but it's a very difficult challenge to overcome.
So there's a hardware side, right? So I believe that you are very well placed here because you're focusing on a specific niche, right? So inference, so general compute will always be a lot less efficient probably on energy because you can't build your architecture of your infrastructure in a certain way because you need to cover all of the use cases, right? So I think Sambano is in a very good place here.
That's what we're trying to do is make AI a lot more accessible and to make it a lot more easy, especially also for data center customers to get these things set up in an efficient manner so they can maximize their floor place, maximize what they need to get started moving in the AI space quickly, right? So, and efficiency becomes a key thing. I think that's the key word here, really, to operationalize everything. Switching back to open source, then, maybe to wrap up here, would love to get your thoughts on where you think this everything is headed in, let's say, the next 5 years. And if you were to fill in the blank of like in the next 5 years, open source will, what would that be?
So I think there will be a lot more, hopefully, there will be a lot more players in open source than today, because now we have Meta, which is semi-open source, right?
Yeah.
We have Mistral, we have Twin
Yeah.
model families, we have DeepSeek. So I think there will be more players in China for sure, right? Hopefully there will be a lot more players in Europe as well, because now, thanks to everyone from the US, we are getting a lot more infrastructure set up locally here in Europe, which is very important for us.
Yeah.
So that, and in general, I believe that 5 years might seem a very short period of time with the things moving so fast nowadays. But enterprises and big companies were a lot slower to kind of adopt all of this technology. So there's still so much more to embed into enterprises, and I think in 5 years we are still not gonna be there eventually. Like,
fair enough. I mean, I think there's obviously, I think, a lot more work that needs to be done, and I think depending on the use case, I think enterprises are rightfully slow to move cautiously because we're still learning so much all the time. How do you successfully deploy agents? How would you successfully deploy physical AI? Right? It's not easy to do these safely, securely, reliably, without potentially causing some harm down the road, right? And I think that's the delicate balance. Not only enterprises, but governments also equally have to face 100%. As well.
But there are, those AI native companies that are building the future of AI, of the world, probably, right? With AI. So there will be a big leap, very big difference between an newly AI built company and enterprise. Right? So
it'll be interesting to see how that evolves.
Definitely.
You mentioned also the geopolitics side, so I'd love to dive into that. Obviously, right now, China is kind of leading in the open source ecosystem. You do see on the US side that we have a lot more closed source models that are out there. How do you imagine that growing and evolving over the next several years? And more specifically, also since we're here at Raise at the summit, how do you see that evolving kind of within the European ecosystem with more players kind of getting into open source?
So in Europe, we kind of definitely are lagging behind, like big, right?
Yeah.
But now with France leading the charge and the actual players of the US bringing the infrastructure to Europe is definitely helping us, because we have the talent. We definitely have the talent to build those solutions. We don't have infrastructure, and we are sometimes even kind of lagging in the models that we get to use in Europe. So I think that will be the difference will be narrowing down eventually, because Europe is also understanding little by little that it needs to be like this. When it comes to China, unfortunately, it is now leading open source provider of LLMs, and I think it will continue to grow.
Do you see Europe catching up?
No. I think that US will have problems catching up. Right?
Yeah.
Not eventually. That's.
I mean, I think it'll be interesting to see whenever OpenAI actually open sources their model, how that competes. I was hoping it would happen in June. They pushed it out, but my hope is that, I mean, it's democratizing access across the board. I think it'll be like the US and China are definitely playing a big role here. It'll be very interesting to see Europe come into the game as well, because I think you're right. There's a lot of really good talent here. I mean, even whether it's Mistral, Hugging Face, right? I think there's a lot more room to grow. And I'm excited to see if that they can grow and catch up. Because I think it'll be, the more we have kind of contributing to the space and making it better is always a good thing. And I think that's kind of the beauty of open source, right? Is it allows us to innovate together and push each other to produce more and better things. So looking forward to seeing that. Maybe one last hot take before we wrap up. On the proprietary side, because I think we've talked a little bit about this, open source seems to be kind of commoditizing a lot of things. from the proprietary model providers, what do you think is the thing that they should be fearing the most about how open source is evolving and growing?
So one is, of course, the convergence of the capability of the models, but also if we are moving to those smaller models, right, then the kind of the proprietary side of it kind of loses the importance, right? Because small models can be trained in an open source way relatively easily compared to the big models. Also, the privacy side of it. So, there, as we move to the enterprise, and of course, those big labs of the world have their own enterprise offerings. But with open source, we can also move into enterprises and make that more secure. And as an enterprise decision maker, for me, it would be a question: should I use an open source large model, or should I really go and pay a huge amount of money to the big AI lab, right?
Sure.
Because there's that trade.
Yeah.
So I think the big shift towards enterprise could be a big one, and models becoming smaller in agentic systems could also.
I think that's a great way to summarize it. Any last learnings that you'd want to share with the audience as to wrap up?
I think what we are currently lacking, not even lacking, I think it's a natural evolution of the state we are in, is that we need to upskill more and more people so that we are able to build more and more agentic applications, more startups, AI native startups. So it's really now about upskilling the population.
Yeah, I mean, I think the more startups innovating, I think it's really exciting. But just in general, more people innovating is always really exciting. So awesome! Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
This is a really great conversation, and I'm hoping the audience has learned a ton from your expertise this year.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome.